Good morning, family.
Morning, Mitch.
Wherever we may be found, wherever we may be. I just realized I left my clicker somewhere. Is it in the seat still? Oh, man. 1 second. I tell you, it doesn't matter how much you prepare to get all the ducks in a row.
Amen.
There's always a duck that doesn't want to be in the right place. Mainly Ray, but we'll just go with that. Today is Palm Sunday. I have it now, Chris, thank you. Today's Palm Sunday. That may mean nothing for a lot of traditions, church traditions, but if you follow the traditions of the church, what Palm Sunday means is it's the beginning of Holy Week. And it's 1 week from Easter. But whenever I think the beginning of Holy Week, the thought that immediately comes to mind is it doesn't feel that holy this week. In fact, it feels a little old already at this point. It feels a little unclean. It doesn't feel extremely holy. And now we know that this new normal, Adam and I, we hesitate calling it that way because we don't want to acknowledge it, but it is. We know that this new normal is now going to be here at least another month for us. So I guess the words that I could think of with this is, hang in there. We'll make it through it. In fact, we might actually learn a lesson or two along the way. And that's the thing I'm most excited about, is the lessons that we might learn along the path of this crazy. So as we come into Palm Sunday, we're continuing our series that is called Slogan, that has been leading into Easter, and we've been looking at gospel metaphors. These are meant to remind us of gospel truths to help us compel us into gospel living. That's the point that we're looking at. So we're going to be heading into Luke 7 this morning. But before we dive into the text, I want to set it up by asking a simple question. How good are your manners? I know the answer for some of you, but I'm going to test. Here's a little test. I'd like you to actually do this, consider doing this at home with your family, or just answer, all right? So here's the first question. When should one start eating the main course of a formal dinner? Is it A, after the hostess is seated? B, after the hostess lifts her fork? C, after 3 or 4 people are served? Or D, as soon as humanly possible? Now, some of you are going to be like, well, D, I'm going to jump in there. I waver somewhere towards the D. But go ahead and ask your family if you got a moment. Of course you have a moment. Nothing better to do right now. Ask your family, see what they come up with. All right, you ready for the right answer? According to manners? C, after 3 or 4 people are served. I would ask for a show of hands of how many people got that right, but I realize that is an exercise in futility. So I'll move on to the next question. When should one add salt and pepper or any other seasoning? Is it A, whenever you want? Is it B, after tasting the food first? Is it C, before eating anything? Or is it D, never? It's not considered good manners to add seasoning. Take a moment. See if your kids know this one. Got your answer? Correct answer is B, after tasting the food first. In fact, it is considered poor manners to put seasoning before you taste it. But adding seasoning is not necessarily a problem. Now, I could go on and on with these kind of questions. In fact, I kind of went down a rabbit trail this week looking at different manners and realized the ones that I'm just breaking every day. But some other ones that I'm like, got it. I knew that one. But there's all sorts of ideas in every culture of how to be polite. What it looks like, what it means like to be polite, to have good manners. That is true of every culture here and then every culture across the world, but also every culture throughout time. This is definitely true in the culture in Luke 7. In Luke 7, Jesus is at a dinner party where all kind of bad manners are happening. He's eating at the home of Simon the Pharisee. Now, Simon breaks a few of these rules, not because he doesn't know the rules, not someone like me. He knows all the rules. He rather breaks the rules because he doesn't like Jesus. In fact, Simon, it seems, is trying to blatantly be disrespectful of Jesus. So So let's pick up the story in Luke 7. It says this. One of the Pharisees asked Jesus to have dinner with him. So Jesus went to his home and sat down to eat. When a certain immoral woman from the city heard he was eating there, she brought a beautiful alabaster jar filled with expensive perfume. Then she knelt behind him at his feet, weeping. Her tears fell on his feet, and she wiped them off with her hair. Then she kept kissing his feet and putting perfume on them. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, "If this man were a prophet, he would know what kind of woman is touching him. She's a sinner." Then Jesus answered his thoughts. Moment. Notice that. He thought to himself, and now Jesus answered his thoughts. That ought to tell you something about Jesus. He says, "Simon," he said to the Pharisee, "I have something to say to you." Now, that may sound like a normal conversation for us. And if I'm sitting around the dinner table and I say, hey, Katie, or any of my girls, I got something to tell you. It sounds like the beginning of, here's a story. Here's what happened during my day. But I want you to know that in the culture, in this time, the context of this phrase is a whole lot more pointed. In fact, what Jesus is saying is, hey, Simon, I'm about to get down to business here. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm going to shoot straight with you, just to borrow a few metaphors. So Jesus says, "I'm going to shoot straight." "Go ahead, teacher," Simon replied. Then Jesus told him a story. A man loaned money to two people, 500 pieces of silver to one and 50 pieces to the other. But neither of them could repay him. So he kindly forgave them both, canceling their debts. Who do you suppose loved him more after that? Well, Simon answered, "I suppose the one whom he canceled the larger debt." "Well, that's right," Jesus said. Then he turned to the woman and said to Simon, "Look at this woman kneeling here. When I entered your home, you didn't offer me water to wash the dust from my feet, but she has washed them with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You didn't greet me with a kiss, but from the time I first came in, she has not stopped kissing my feet. You neglected the courtesy of olive oil to anoint my head, but she has anointed my feet with rare perfume. I tell you, her sins, and they are many, have been forgiven. So she has shown me much love. But a person who is forgiven little shows only little love." So now we see the fullness of the story of what's going on. Jesus has been invited to eat at Simon's house, but when Jesus shows up, we see that the social niceties, the normal manners of the time are not being addressed. Simon is flat out rude. You see, it was customary during that time that whenever you greeted someone of equal status and standing, you would kiss each other on each side of the face. Very, very similar to an Italian, what we might consider an Italian greeting. Now, in our day and age, this might mean, maybe in our culture, that Jesus came in without a hug or a handshake. Scratch that. In our COVID-19 culture, I really don't have a great equivalent here. This is kind of how we all have to treat each other, but it was rude in this time, all right? It was actually also customary, actually it was mandatory, that whenever you hosted a meal, when someone came in, they had to wash their feet before the meal. Now, if a host really wanted to honor his guest, he would do it himself, but at minimum, he would present a slave to be able to do this. And at bare minimum, he would provide a basin of water and a towel for each guest to wash their own feet as they came in. As the story goes, Simon neglected this. I mean, this is kind of like denying people the right, the option of washing their hands before they eat. We've realized in our COVID-19 culture that very few people wash their hands. I mean, like watching all these videos of how to wash your hands, I'm like, do people seriously need to know this? Yes, they do. They've not been taught. But it's kind of like saying, hey, you can't do that here. You can't wash your hands in my house. There was another custom that wasn't necessary in that time, but it was a way of honoring your guest. And it was to take a little bit of inexpensive olive oil and anoint the person with that. This was maybe a way for us like freshening up, to have just a little bit different, freshen up for the meal. But Simon, again, does not offer this. It's as if Simon doesn't really want Jesus at his table. But there's an irony to this whole scene. See, Simon has invited Jesus to his table, but he acts like he doesn't want Jesus there. But the irony is that Simon is a Pharisee that has been trained, has gone through rabbinical school. What that means is he knows Scripture. By the age of 12, he would have memorized the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Now, most of us have a hard time reading the first 5 books of the Old Testament. We get Genesis, we get Exodus, and then we skip to Psalms, because that's a whole lot easier. He'd have those memorized by 12. By 15, he would have the whole Old Testament memorized as a rabbi. What that means, though, is that Simon would have just about 300 prophecies of the coming Messiah rattling around in his brain. Because over 300 times the Old Testament has prophecies about the coming of the Messiah. And so he would have this in his mind. He would be looking out for the Messiah. But the irony is, when the Messiah actually shows up at his table, Simon misses it. In fact, the Messiah goes without a kiss on the cheek, without his feet being washed, or some oil on his head. Now that happened in Simon's house. But all too often, I think that happens in our houses too. Even now, when going to church means gathering in the living room around the TV, looking at people doing the things and trying to participate as best we can because of our current crisis, the thing is, we still forget that Jesus is with us. There are a lot of people that are still concerned that, man, we can't worship properly if we're not all gathered together, because somehow Jesus, in their minds, is tied to a sanctuary, is tied to a building. And we forget that Jesus is with us. Often we'll quote the where 2 or 3 are gathered, there I am in their midst. It's actually, Jesus is always with us. It's not simply 2 or 3 are gathered. It's anyone whose heart is with Jesus, Jesus is with them. So you may be thinking, wow, Mitch, I'm watching this right now. You know, I'm pretty sure Jesus is welcome at this table. I'm trying my best to say, hey, he's in my home. I'm trying to honor Jesus. Great. What about tomorrow? And the next day? And the next? See, our normal routine, if you think back to, 3 years ago, because that's what it feels like, it may have just been 3 weeks ago, our normal routine was we'd go to church and do the things on Sunday, and then we'd go to work Monday and go about our business. And that's fine. But we'd often forget to honor Jesus every day. One of the blessings that I think we have in this moment is that people forget what day it is. We forget, oh man, what day is this today? The benefit of that is you can wake up and just assume every day is a day to worship God. Let's just assume every day is a day to welcome Jesus to the table, Sunday or not. And that might get us on a good habit that we hope would keep as life grinds on. See, so often in so many of our homes, Jesus goes without a kiss on the cheek, feet being washed, or his head anointed. The things that we are supposed to honor him with. It happened in Simon's day. But the story doesn't stop there. In fact, actually, it starts with a woman entering. Sorry, not just any woman. It's not just a woman. It's a sinful woman. Now, this isn't meant to just really convey that this is a woman who has sinned, because that would be careful saying this, that would be any woman, but it would also be any man. I'll get in trouble for that later, I'm sure. This is not simply a word or context that is meant to say she has sinned, but probably rather that she makes a living sinning. That she not just is living in sin, but uses sin as a means for her living. Most scholars believe that she is a prostitute at some level. Now would be a great time, children, to ask your parents what in the world that means. Totally kidding. But now you're going to have that. Good luck. I want you to imagine this scene as she walks in. This is a religious leader's house. It's a formal meal. This is a place that you would imagine would have all the niceties. Everything would be put in order. Everything would be cleaned up and presented. And then in walks this woman of ill repute. She makes her way to Jesus. And everyone recognizes, man, this is an awkward situation. There's no way around it. Everyone knows who this woman is. In fact, reading between the lines, it is quite possible that several of the men in this room have employed her services before. And maybe they're a little afraid that she's there to rat them out. This is an awkward situation. But she goes directly to Jesus. We don't know fully the backstory. Jesus tells us a little bit that she has been forgiven many sins. She goes to Jesus, and I'm guessing it's because no man has ever looked at her the way that Jesus has. Every other man has seen her as just for her physical attributes, just for what she can do or give to them, but not Jesus. Jesus looks with her with genuine love, and she's undone by that love. She falls at his feet and sobbing. Her tears fall from her cheeks down, landing on the feet of Jesus, and it's then that she noticed that his feet are dirty. I don't think she planned on washing his feet, otherwise she probably would have brought some more things. The only thing that we're told that she brought was an alabaster jar full of perfume. But she sees this common nicety was not given to Jesus, and so maybe it's a little embarrassed. She keeps on crying on the tears, crying her tears on his feet to get them wet enough. And then she lets down her hair. In that moment, there would be more than likely an audible gasp. Because this is something you didn't do. Well, not at the dinner table. The only time a woman would let down her hair would be for an intimate expression. Something that this woman has probably done for many men, but for a very different reason. She begins to wash his feet and dry her tears with her hair. No doubt everyone is silent in this moment. They're probably hoping that Jesus, being the one who this is given to, would scold her and say, this is inappropriate. You're breaking all the social taboos of our time. Maybe another time, but instead Jesus is silent. And when I picture Jesus here, I see him smiling. Then this woman takes this alabaster jar of expensive perfume. This perfume that she would have used more than likely in the past to attract men. This perfume that she would only use one drop at a time because that's all it would need for her trick. One drop at a time that would last her a very long time. She pours it all out on Jesus' feet. In fact, Mark, whenever the story is told in the Gospel of Mark, says that she empties the jar. And so we have our slogan for today. Empty the jar. What does that mean? Think about this woman for a second. Whenever she emptied the jar, this jar represented so much about her. She could have sold it, so it would represent her wealth. It was a tool of her trade, so it represented her life and even part of her identity. This jar represented everything that she was. And she pours it all out. When was the last time you did something like that for Jesus? When was the last time the love and grace of Jesus in your life has moved you to tears? Tears enough to wash someone's feet with. When was the last time that you took what was most precious and valuable, your identity, and handed it over to Jesus? When did you empty your jar of your wealth or of your life at his feet? See, emptying the jar is when you say to Jesus, everything I have is yours. My gifts, my talents, my money, my time, no, it's already yours. Emptying your jar is whenever you give in such a way that other people are going to think you've taken this Jesus thing a little too far. Everyone in the room would probably think that this is a little too extravagant. You don't need that much perfume on someone's feet. Well, maybe some of you would beg to differ. You have some loved ones in your life, you're like, all the perfume in the world can't cover it. But the thing is, a sister story of this, similar idea happening. Judas speaks up and says, we could have sold this and given to the poor. And Jesus rebukes him, saying, this woman has prepared me for my burial. She has done what is good. In fact, the church is going to read her story forever. Emptying the jar is doing something in such a way that is extravagant. See, when you empty the jar, it's always extravagant. It's not practical. I learned pretty early on what to do for practical living. There's a lot of practical things, and there's a lot of people that are logical in speaking, that you know, A plus B equals C, and it's a practical, logical approach. But then there are other people, like maybe this woman, and maybe how we should be at times, that just jump in and say, all right, I'm all in. It doesn't make sense to the rest of the world. It doesn't make sense to the people that are gathered around, but it's something that Jesus smiles upon. He does with this woman. See, emptying the jar, emptying your jar, is the mark of a changed life. A life that knows how much they have been forgiven. So that's the point of the story Jesus tells Simon. He says that the one who has forgiven more debt loves more. And this woman gets it. She loves extravagantly because she's been forgiven so much, she is willing to offer everything. In fact, verse 48 continues and says, then Jesus said to the woman, your sins are forgiven. The men at the table said among themselves, who is this man that he goes around forgiving sins? And Jesus said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. This is what emptying the jar offers us. Peace. See, when you realize just how much you have received from Jesus, then it's no big deal to empty the jar. When you realize just how much you've given, it's no big deal. You don't think through it going, oh man, how are we going to make ends meet? How are we going to do this? It's just the logical right choice. Christ has given me everything. Who am I to hold on to this? But see, if you don't realize how much Christ has given you, or how much you really need Christ, then it's always going to be hard to empty your jar. Rather, you're going to want to hold on to it. You're going to want to store it away. You're going to want to build up your savings account for the rainy day. You're going to want to stock up on the toilet paper right now, just in case. You're going to want to not give as much to church as you have been. Now, God will understand. He might. But the thing is, I don't think He ever understands a heart that is divided. See, when we don't realize what all we have been given, we try to hold on to the wrong things, instead of holding on to the only thing that matters, being at the feet of Jesus. So may we be the kind of people that know how much we have been forgiven and how much we have received, that we know how much grace God has given us and how much we are loved. And thus, may we be the kind of people who are always willing to empty the jar. Each week doing this in this style, we have not had what is called the typical invitation, partly because it's kind of weird to say, come and as we stand and sing, because we really can't do that. But I want you to know that there are things that we can still do. As a church, we can pray, and we'd love to know your individual prayers. You can text me, you can text any one of the elders, shoot an email to the church office, that if you have prayers, if you have something that is on your heart, man, we would love to join you in that. If you have a need, same thing. And I want to let you know there are plenty of things that are closed, but the baptistry is not. We can always go down to the waters as you give your life to Christ, saying, I am all in. And you empty the jar for Him and go into the baptistry and be washed away of your sins, just as this woman, so that you can live in the freedom that she has, in the peace that she has on the other side. So I want to let you know that that's offered and available, and we'll figure it out. But please let us know if you need anything. Let's sing together.